Bills training camp is back. We'll break down the strongest and weakest position groups, plus who might emerge as the camp darling at St. John Fisher. And is it a good thing or a bad thing that the Bills are a Super Bowl favorite? All that's coming up on this week's edition of the Buffalo Plus Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus Podcast presented by Buffalo Plus. As always, Mike Catalana, Dan Fates. I am Jenna Cottrell. Training camp is right around the corner at St. John Fisher University in Rochester and Pittsford, more specifically. So let's get talking about it because preseason football is about to be back. Mike, where do you think heading into this season, the Bills obviously have high expectations. We'll get into that a little bit later. But what do you think is we'll start with the strongest position group as we head in?
All right, I'm going to cheat here a little bit, but this isn't really my answer. Okay. Quarterback is their strongest position.
Yeah. Seems like
correct.
A bet.
Okay, they've got 17. I like the backups as for their roles.
Yeah.
They were good. But come on. You know that's not what we're talking about. I mean, we can say that because they have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL as their starter. But you can look at this in two different ways. Like, it's hard to be better than they are at safety. But, you know, when you talk about overall depth in the secondary, and then you say, like Dan has talked about, the defensive line used to have depth, but it was all kind of here. Yeah. Now they've gone a little higher end. So depends on how you look at it. But I would say this. If I'm looking right now, and I am going to say this as a combination of top end and depth, and I'm making a switch on where I was, I'm going to say right now defensive line. Because you've got Von Miller at the top, and you have Ed Oliver, and you have talent through. To Dan's point, then you've made it accurately a few times, they had a lot of guys sort of even. I think Von Miller changes that dynamic. I think he gives you top end and all that depth. You know, Dan, your second or third starter's a lot better when you bring in the ace. They brought in the ace. So I'm going to say defensive line for both reasons.
Mike, does it at all concern you? I was trying to look at, what the big storylines, kind of what we're talking about in this podcast. And doesn't somebody need to step up as that number two guy? Like, I know we've talked about it before, but it's like you started to see like Von Miller talked about it. Like when he got to rush with Aaron Donald or, like Max Crosby, like there are other guys on the other side that also have success because of it. TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, like usually you have to have a duo. I don't disagree with you. I just don't know if it's the strongest in the sense. I think it's top heavy. I think, like I said, I really like what you have with Von Miller. My question is, you'll be right if Greg Rousseau has 8 sacks, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is. And Jenna, I'm also not just going defensive end here. I mean, I think Ed Oliver with Tim Settle may have more help on the inside. Yeah. And he can become a force on the inside. They've added depth and all these draft picks. I guess, Jenna, I'm just giving them a little more of a boost because what they did at the top.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because the talent that they brought in. But yeah, you're expecting with how much they've invested in that defensive line to see some payoff, especially in a guy like Greg Rousseau, who obviously was getting his feet wet last season. You saw those flashes of what he could do, but you obviously want to see more. All right, Dan, what about you? Strongest position group?
It's funny. We talk about how much. It's been a while since we've had football, so a lot of the takes we're kind of you recycle them in a different way. I think the strongest position is cornerbacks. I think top to bottom, I really like it, and this goes back to my Dane Jackson appreciation. But I think him as it's almost like we have Trey White coming back. You have a first round pick. You have Taron Johnson, who has played really well, and then you have Dane Jackson. Like I think those are 4 good corners, and then if you cycle to some other guys that are familiar with the system and all of that, I like their corners. I think it's one of the stronger positions on this team. And again, you could probably throw a dart at the secondary for the Bills and say, whether it's safety or corner, they're pretty good.
Yeah. Mike was smiling though.
I'm trying to do like this. I'm making a very big question mark. Dan, everybody you mentioned has a big question mark around them. Can Dane Jackson step up to the next level? Ka'ir Elam is a rookie. No, to now being starter level.
Okay.
And Trey is coming back from an ACL. I think they have the potential. You talk about somebody else needing to step up. which is true. It's similar to what I said on the defensive line. But this team needs Trey White to be Trey White, and then they need either a rookie or a guy who has been mostly a backup nickel guy, dime guy, to step up maybe in that role, or a rookie who's never played in the NFL to be in that role. So that's where I see, again, potential. If Trey's Trey, even if it's 6 weeks into the year, and that rookie is what they hope he is, I'm with you 100%. But Jenna, I see really big question mark there.
I think that's fair because there are so many moving parts, I feel like, as we approach. And I know that I've talked about this, but like the health of Trey White, what expectations can we place on Kaiir Elam? Obviously a first round pick, incredibly talented guy. I don't think it's, I think it's work ethic is there. All of those things are there. That's why the Bills picked him. But there is a difference when you get into the NFL. For a lot of players, you see that adjustment period, and where will we be at, early on in the season compared to later on? Like there's so many question marks. Dan,
look at him. He is going to be on this.
Okay, wait.
Like,
before your rebuttal, Dan, can you show off the gear? Because
look at that.
The Buffalo
it's all logoed up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quarter
the microphone's hiding it a little bit.
Yeah.
But,
Legit.
I look at this as last year. I didn't think the corners were an issue by any sense of the imagination. I thought they were solid. And I think that Kaiir Elam is an upgrade from Levi Wallace.
He might very well be. You may be 100% correct.
So if he's an upgrade and you have Taron Johnson,
you can't just plug that into place. You can't just say, so he's an upgrade. He has absolutely the ceiling for Kaiir Elam is way higher than Levi Wallace based on draft position, based on all the pedigree, all of those things. But you can't just immediately say that
that's what this whole hypothetical thing is the sense of what position do we think that they are strongest at? They are strongest potentially, in my opinion, at corner because Kaiir Elam has a much higher ceiling than Levi Wallace. And then again, if you're telling me the fourth corner on this team is Dane Jackson, who played in big games, playoff games, down the stretch, is your fourth corner, I will take that any day of the week over a lot of other number 4 corners on other teams.
And you know what? I didn't add, Jenna, but I'm going to let you finish off Dan here with his point. I think right now their most dependable and best corner is Taron Johnson. He just happens to be in the slot because we don't know about Trey yet. And Johnson plays his position as well as maybe anybody in the league. And it's a very valuable position. I have faith that guy was really good last year, and he's going to be really good this year. Yeah. And I think Trey White will get back to being Trey. We certainly hope, and every Bills fan hopes. And you're right, Dan, about, but we're talking week 1 here. Let's say week 1. Okay. Let's see what it is. Sorry, Jenna, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I mean, I think we're on the same page. I understand. We're talking projections for Dan. Dan is projecting. Correct. Yeah. Okay.
He projects.
So the assignment
Mike was saying he's projecting that somebody, Ed Oliver, will step up and become a second pass rusher. Like
Ed Oliver has been a really good player for them already.
He led the team last year, Mike, in sacks. He had 4 sacks.
And now he's got Hall of Famer Von Miller
next to him. So you're projecting that he's going to be better. You can't project that, guys. You just told me you can't project.
Okay,
you're projecting guys who've never played.
Ed Oliver has experience in the league. Okay.
Go ahead, Jenna.
Again, this is truly who Dan is. All right, so I kind of interpreted the assignment also in a different way. But I said more I was talking about like the trainers, like the physical, like the guys that get the players ready on the field. And hear me out, because I think the track record shows that down the stretch, the Bills have been, knocking on wood, a great team. And I feel like that preparation that goes in, that is going into this season, the strongest point going off of that being Trey White and where we can expect him to be. Yeah. And the fact that, I know, this is we're going around.
No. I love the next level thinking here. So you're saying the best position group is trainer.
Like the trainers, yeah.
I think that is they are, I say unsung hero.
We're playing checkers.
But you really
next level.
That is next level because it is important. They get guys on the field. Guys come back from injury. Yeah. They have done a phenomenal job
Yes.
I was going
That's an
more
awesome take.
players, but God, Jenna, way to go.
Yeah.
I like it.
I mean, I think, and you mentioned like Taron Johnson, a player that has had his injuries in the past, obviously, but was able to stay on the field last year. And just that seemed to me like the strongest position heading into another season, and one that I don't think, get enough credit in the NFL, considering with the Bills and what they've been able to do and how much that helps just in the longevity of the season, getting the guys that they need back. And I mean, we already talked about Josh Allen and the quarterbacks being the strongest position group. Because I wanted to also talk about like wide receiver, but you mentioned the question marks. I think there are those question marks there. There's obviously a ridiculous amount of talent, but Dan is so happy, and I almost want to take back this bit that I've been talking about because Dan is so happy. But no, I think there's obviously the potential there. And when Josh Allen is throwing you the ball, that potential even increases that much more. But there are just some players that I'm not sure how it will look when we get into this season.
Daniel?
Dan.
That's my weakest group.
Wow. Your weakest group? You wouldn't say running backs?
No, I actually think that there are guys, at least in the running backs, that have played. There's a lot of question marks in the sense of Gabe Davis. Again, I've talked about it. I'm not going to get into it a 50th time, but just saying, like, it's a lot of pressure on Gabe Davis. And I know he's added muscle and his workouts and all. There's no question he's a hard worker, but like him stepping up to the number 2 role is a lot. And you have to replace guys like Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders and those things. And I know you added Tavon Austin and you added Jamison Crowder, but like not all veteran leadership is created equally. And I think that just because those guys have been around the league and Tavon Austin has been around the league doesn't mean he's a great veteran wide receiver. And they are going to have to replace a slot wide receiver, which has been crucial to Josh Allen's development as this MVP caliber quarterback. The connection that he had with Beasley, and I know it was up and down last year and all of those things, but when you needed a big play, Mike, at times you said, just throw the ball to Beasley. Yeah. Like you were good. Well, and the top end of the group, no doubt about it, is Stephon Diggs.
Right. It's a good point. I like the point in a sense. You know, it's funny, Jenna, when we were talking about like nothing's done in a vacuum here. They're playing like when I was talking about corners and the things I'm concerned about, it's also realizing that they've got Poyer and Hyde behind them, which helps the group. But we're trying to separate them. We are trying to put them a bit in a vacuum. Plus, Sean McDermott and his staff have done a phenomenal job in the secondary. I mean, they just really have. I mean, this is a strength of this franchise. It has been. At the wide receiver position, that's interesting. It's interesting how Dan can project a kid who's never played in the NFL before, but has a tough time projecting an improvement of a guy who had 12 touchdowns and 6,000 yards in the playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that was, Jenna, was that the accurate number?
Yeah, no, that was the stat line. Yeah.
Yes. So it's hard to project the guy who had one of the great games in playoff history as being better this year, but we can project.
And one final point on Gabriel Davis, because we all remember the game. Phenomenal game.
Yeah.
NFL record-setting game. Unbelievable, right? But there's this thing where you talk about like anomalies in statistics, where it's like sometimes you have to take out the best and the worst because statistically they don't match the data. Yeah. So I've got some other data for you. In 2020, Gabe Davis had 7 games with 1 catch or less. He had 1 game with 5 or more. Last year, including the postseason, 4 games, 1 catch or less. 3 games, 5 or more. This is going to have to be a bulk increase for Gabe Davis.
I agree with you. I'm just saying,
so I'm looking at the big picture because everybody sees the potential. That's fine. I understand that. But I look at like the data and what I've seen. It is the median is much closer to a top 40 wide receiver than a top 20 wide receiver. And that's where I'm concerned that the number 2 guy, because even if it was Emmanuel Sanders, a little bit more of a track record than a guy that's played for 2 years, stepping up in this role. I hope I'm wrong. I will gladly come on this podcast and say I'm an idiot for the 30th time and say Gabe Davis is a Pro Bowler. He's going to have an all-pro season. I hope that's the case. But I'm more skeptical than other people, as I've said 100 times.
I think I'm glad you talked us through that because I understand what you are saying. I just think the moments that I think of are in the playoffs, against that Colts game,
Yep.
some of those catches, things like that, that I think it will obviously be a bigger role that he will step into, but I think the foundation that he has laid has showed me that he can do that. He can excel in that role. Now, that doesn't mean every game he's going to have a fantastic game or he's going to have a bunch of catches, but I think overall he has been groomed to take over that spot. And I feel he can be competent at that. And then you also look at the ceiling of what he could possibly be. And you think, yeah, he's definitely got the talent to do special things.
100%. And I always think back to that Colts game. They don't win that Colts game without Gabe Davis in 2020. Just unreal catches on the sideline. My thing is we always talk about Josh Allen and how he has to change that cat and mouse game because defenses defend him differently. Gabe Davis will now be game planned against. And I don't think how much defenses feared game planned against Gabe Davis. I bet you the Chiefs said, we really messed that up.
It was interesting how they played him after he had gotten him for 3 touchdowns when the defender got so twisted up, fell down on his own backside, and he beat him for that touchdown when they probably should have been doubling Gabe Davis late in that game. So, yes, you can always say that the difference is the numbers, though it's odd that it ended up being that way in the playoff game, which are crazy numbers. I mean, let's be honest, 200 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, that's... If you're doing that all the time, you're an all-time great, right? You're
the greatest
Randy
ever.
Moss, right? But in this case, I do think it's also opportunities, and I think Josh Allen has shown he does have a trust in Gabe Davis, but I think he's also going to be looking to him more. It's sort of the way Dawson Knox developed into that big question mark, and he kept getting him the ball.
Good point.
And then he put up the numbers. So I do think wide receiver is really interesting. They do have these veteran guys who have been productive players in the NFL, like Crowder, like Tavon Austin, and you got Isaiah McKenzie, and you got the draft picks. So there is guys, Jenna, but the question is, what role do you? Yeah, and look, I'm going to go back one last thing to Beasley. Cole Beasley is, in hindsight, the guy they're going to miss. It's not like they should have brought him back.
Correct.
I think he's gotten beaten up physically. It's a tough position to play.
Correct.
But it's the idea of what he gave you for those years, and it was productive, that they're going to miss.
I agree. I think Jameson Crowder, to me, that is someone I'm really looking forward to seeing at camp and just see how he can fit into this offense. Just because he played very well against the Bills, I felt like in spots.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So I'm wondering what that will be like
with horrendous quarterback play most of the time.
Where you're like, wow, he played pretty well. So I'm interested to see how that will go in that transition.
And that's the other point I was saying about just like a lack of veteran leadership. And I'm not saying that like Tavon Austin's been around the league for 9 years, but it's different when you've been Emmanuel Sanders or you've been on like 3 or 4 teams that really wanted you and you brought something with them, or compared to Tavon Austin, who has bounced around and teams have said, yeah, we'll bring you in. We're all good. Like that, I think there is something to be said for the journeyman veteran, different than the Pro Bowl veteran that is coming over like a Von Miller who has played for 2 teams that really loved him.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely very different situations. It's hard to even compare those.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying everything's like, oh, they have like you lose Emmanuel Sanders, you lose Cole Beasley. People are like, oh, they replaced him with Tavon Austin and Jamison Crowder. It's like, those vets completely different.
Yeah, like, I see.
Emmanuel Sanders has played with Hall of Fame quarterbacks and has won Super Bowls. Jamison Crowder has played pretty well on a crappy offense. Different levels of veteran experience.
Right. Yeah. But I think if anything, that makes him hungrier.
And he's playing with Josh Allen. That makes him better, too.
Yes, that makes him better than whatever the
Jenna, who you got for weakest position group?
I was going to say running back, just because I felt like we saw Devin Singletary down the stretch find some consistency. And I'm curious how things will be now, especially with the new offensive line coach and how that like plays into stuff. But I think, look, I mean, they drafted James Cook early on in the draft. I think Zach Moss is kind of a make it or break it type of year, seeing how he kind of fell off at the end of last year. But I just look at this team and look, I know Dan gets mad. Josh Allen should operate this Bills offense. The ball should go through him. But at the same point, It's 18 games in the regular season. Not everything's going to work, and you need to have another level or another option to go to when things aren't working, A, and B, also just to keep defenses on their toes. I think you need to have that change of pace. So I'm curious to see how things will play out with Singletary and with James Cook, just especially since it can be more of a pass catcher as well. But that to me is just, I mean, look, the offense, they know how to score points, but at the same point, I just haven't been impressed with the running back position, and I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
Not fair.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's also a position on the offense that is less, not less impactful, but
I think that's fair.
They prioritize passing the ball, and it's
as they should.
Yeah, but it's going to be different. And I'm only going to say this: I like the fact the veterans they brought in on the O-line, right?
Yep.
And I like that. I need to see. What I really want to see in a championship team is that 5-man offensive line, that the best you can. Even obviously injuries happen, but against it, forgetting injuries for a second, you establish that.
Yep.
And Aaron Cromer gets his 5.
Yep.
And last year again it was tough. Because Dion wasn't healthy, and then Spencer Brown, between COVID and other things, he's out, and then he comes back, and he was good, and then he went through a bit of a rough patch, I thought, for him.
Yeah.
So I know there are other guys. I know they've gone out there and brought in some of the veterans, and I thought Mitch Morris was really consistent. Yes. But I'm talking about a championship offensive line here, and my concern is that they don't get to that 5. But I got to give Cromer some time here because he's been a successful guy, and I think he's going to identify that and maybe get to that point at some point during the year, and then you go forward there. So I guess I just have still question marks about the O-line because it's so important to every other aspect that we're talking about.
I think that's a great point, Mike. And like the few things that just clicked into my head is we always, sometimes I try and compare things to other sports because maybe somebody else can understand it better. It's like when you have a bullpen in baseball that who gets the ball in the 7th inning, who gets the ball in the 8th inning, who your closer is. Compared to that bullpen by committee, you're like, okay, who's the guy today? You know who the guy is. It's like having your first line on a hockey team. Like that's the line that we're putting out there. They're the best line. That's what we're going to do. And it's the same way in the NBA when you have your 5 guys for crunch time, not your 5 starters.
Yep.
One of your best players may be on the bench, but he's the guy that's going to be in when the game is on the line. So like, I totally agree with you talking about establishing those guys. Who they are. That as long as everybody's healthy, that's who it's going to be. And it's not going to be, hey, is Bates going to swing outside? Is Spencer going to move in? Like, who's going to fill that up? I think that's a great
swing
point, Mike.
Tackles, all that stuff where you're like, okay, it'd probably be better if we knew.
Yeah.
But
point,
if you
Mike.
identify that where you've got your 5 and you've got your swing guard tackle and you've got your swing center guard, and, because like we said, your O-line, you're looking at 7 to 8 active, maybe 8 active guys on a Sunday, but the 5 are starting and they're playing. So yeah. And again, I knew, Cromer when he was here, he's had success. Bobby Johnson dealt with a lot of different things there. I don't mind this move. Let's just see what he can do with it.
I'm excited about the move.
Yeah.
Like for a guy that could care less about running the football, I think more than Singletary or Moss or Duke Johnson, if the Bills' running game is successful, it will be because of Aaron Cromer and not because Devin Singletary or Zach Moss are in the best shape of their life.
Well, they might be, though.
They might be. Haven't heard anything. Mac Jones
That's true. Well,
Mac
last year it was, Mac Jones, but last year it was Devin Singletary in the best shape. All right, who will emerge as the training camp darling? Dan, I'll start with you. What do you think? Thoughts?
It's Tim Settle. Like it's Tim Settle as the guy.
That is a bizarre answer, in my opinion. Okay.
A guy that people will love. He will sign autographs, I imagine, for hours. I think of who was the running back that signed forever, that we have file video of running backs like signing forever. I think a training camp darling. I think of a fan favorite, a guy that fans are going to love. I think it's Tim Settle. I loved his intro press conference. I think he's going to be a fun guy. That's my interpretation of a training camp darling.
Okay. Okay, that's fair.
Jenny, you go second. You go second.
I meant more on the field.
Yeah.
I thought of it more as like
training staff.
No, I was thinking more. I felt like a guy like Tavon Austin because he can make some fun catches. He's very he's got a big personality. One of those guys. I think that he is someone. I feel like we usually fall in love with someone that's also, trying to make the team, trying to figure that out. So I would say
Riley of the team.
Right?
Yes.
Like that type of position. So for that reason, I'm going to say Tavon Austin.
Okay, you guys had nice answers, but I have the winner.
Okay.
James Cook. Fans want what?
Why?
Because they are dying to see a dynamic player in the backfield, and it's training camp, and he's going to be dancing around, going into the end zone all the time, and fans are going to love him, and they're going to be saying, James Cook needs to be the starter. He needs to, forget the fact of pass blocking. Forget the fact he's never lined up. He is going to be a darling of camp. He's going to look great, and he's going to run one back in preseason because he will. He'll make a dynamic play in preseason, and he's going to be on the team. So not the darling oh my, why am I? No, I was thinking of our buddy from England,
Christian Wade.
Christian Wade, who, was phenomenal in his
preseason
role.
legend.
Right. But no, I'm talking about Cook or Khalil Shakir is going to be making some catches, and people are going to get very excited about him. So he'll get a lot of opportunities.
I think the Cook thing makes a lot of sense because Mike's right. Like, nothing gets people more excited about a 20-yard run in training camp when they're not in pads. And the linemen and the defensive linemen just stand there. They're like, "Did you see him break through that hole?" It's like, yeah, that was awesome. Nobody tried to tackle him. Yeah. No, so Mike's right. He's going to have a couple big runs. It's going to be on video. He may not run over a mascot. That's more of an A.J. Dillon style. But
that was wild.
I think that Mike may win that one.
Yeah, but
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I do.
I don't think he has the personality.
It's not about personality. It's Mike saying it's the flash. It's the flash that people will look at and say, "Wow, look at that." And I think Mike's right.
Okay. The rare disagree with Mike. He usually doesn't pull off.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I'm agreeing with Mike and Jenna's not. What is going on?
I know. That actually scares me. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. All right.
You're just wrong. I don't know.
And by the way, it won't be punt guide because people won't be able to watch him very often. Correct. Maybe in the preseason, maybe by the time we get to preseason game. But in camp, those guys stay over by themselves. They do kick some. They do some kicking, but it's more situational than him trying to boom it, 90 yards. Yeah. So he might have his moments, but let's see. Let's see what it is.
Who is the player? We're pulling an audible. Who is the player you're most excited to see at camp?
Von Miller.
Miller. Yeah, that seems
it's so funny because he just does things differently. Where last year I remember sitting down with Greg Rousseau and just being enamored by his size. And he is like maybe 6 foot, 6'1", maybe Von is, and he just goes about it surgically. And I'm excited to see that burst of I've never seen a Hall of Fame pass rusher. So to see that up close will be the person I'm most excited to see.
Yeah. You know who it is for me? It's Stefon Diggs. Because we haven't seen Diggs at St. John Fisher.
That's very fair.
And he is a star on this team. Yeah. I don't know where you got. I have him fan-wise. I think he's 2 behind Josh.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now he's going to be on full display. I mean, we've had, they haven't had a lot of great wide receivers during the training camp era. You did guys like Lee Evans, T.O.
We had a lot of good teams.
Yeah, you're right. But they didn't even have those kind of guys. I mean, they had some nice players. T.O. was here. He's kind of quiet at camp. I mean, he was good with the fans. He signed and he did all that. But Diggs is a star. And I'm just interested to see him we've seen him in those practice settings. He's great just in practice settings with nobody around.
Yeah.
And now with all the fans around, I'm looking forward to seeing his dynamic, because you know what Josh is going to. He's going to be off the charts with Josh at camp.
I think that's someone that I'm excited for the fans to get to see. Rochester fans, the Western New York fans, to get to see this Josh Allen at Fisher. I think that's going to be cool because obviously the first couple of years he was kind of finding his own. And I mean, I remember the first time we really interviewed him, it was like, well, where we wanted to interview him after he got drafted, it was like, well, no, you can't talk to the backup quarterback.
Yep.
He was third string half the time.
Yeah. So like to have this ascension of Josh Allen at training camp is going to be really cool. The star power is.
I'm awesome. Curious as to how they handle the whole autograph thing. I mean,
me too. It's
going to be a bit, and you know, fans going to have to be a little fair to him. But I always think about the fan who's only able to be there that day,
one day,
and they're, you know, it's hard for Josh to just. He's not the guy that walks by people. I mean, he's been great. He was great with his time then, but he could be there for a week and a half signing autographs. So
easily,
we'll see how it goes.
All right, the Bills being Super Bowl favorites, a good thing or a bad thing, Mike?
I go back and forth on this. My initial thought is a bad thing, only because I say to myself, you know, there's already pressure on this team because they've gotten so close. And now it's like, you should be the Super Bowl winner. But then I feel, well, why not? They were the best team last year. They should have beaten the Chiefs. They would have beaten the Bengals, and they would have beaten the Rams in the Super Bowl. They were the best team. That stupid game was on NFL Network again, and I can't not watch it for a little while, the Chiefs game. It's still, it was the number one game of the whole season, you know, when they do that. And I watched that, and I watched the way they played and the way they came back and back and back, and they should have won. So it's a natural fit to say they are the team to beat. But then I look in the conference, and I'm like, okay, but you still have the Chiefs. You still have the Bengals, who, by the way, were in the Super Bowl and probably should have won that game. Yeah. And then you have all these other emerging teams to just say, you know, to not, you know.
Denver with Russell.
Right. All of a sudden, these teams become more viable. And who knows about the whole, you know, North Division, you know, depending on what happens with the Browns and everything. Yeah. But I'm going to say in total, it's a good thing because they've earned the pressure that comes with it. Mm-hmm. They deserve I'll say accolade. They deserve to be put in that spot. But you start out with that right away. And Jenna, it's months before where they can really do something about changing the narrative of what happened a year ago.
Yeah.
I think it is. I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. I think a lot of these things, it's bigger for us than it really is for them. The only thing I'll say is that they're not going to be able to, and we've joked around about it for the last few years, they are not going to be able to play this underdog card, this nobody believes in us card by any means. Like they are now, and I always remember when, you know, Dable did an interview, I think it was with ESPN, and they said like Josh was the only first round pick on their entire offense in all of players that have gotten cut and all those things. Like this is like an all-star team. Like, you know, there is that pressure, which I think is a good thing. Great teams rise to pressure and to seize the moments. I look at, you know, the Rams last year were, again, one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl, and they did.
And they had a lot of pressure on them.
Yeah, and they did with Matt Stafford, and it worked. Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, when he went there, it was like, oh, we got to win. They did. Like, you can do it, and it can rise you and your team up as the rallying call of like, it's time to, you know, as we've said, shit or get off the pot. Like this is the time.
I completely agree, but I also, to me, I think it's hard because when you have those expectations of winning the Super Bowl, we know it's a long season and there's definitely the ruts and the turbulence that come. Yeah. And I think that's it's essentially like a perfect standard you're trying to compete with in my eyes. People, I think, forget that it takes a lot. There's luck. There's figuring stuff out. There's not always going to look perfect as long as you win type of aspect. I think it's exciting.
Take a side, Jenna.
It's exciting, but it scares me. It scares me as someone covering the team because that's the ultimate That's the ultimate goal. And to
is.
have everyone I talk to, like my family members, when I go back home, people are like, oh, the Bills are winning the Super Bowl this year, right? And you're like, yeah, like they have the pieces. Like it's you're gonna get every team's best. You're gonna get all the pressure that comes with being the best. It's just hard to prove you're the best in the NFL because there's so many great teams, especially in the AFC.
Think of what they went through last year. Josh's emergence from really good player to MVP candidate, and he played like an MVP.
Yeah.
This would be a different conversation if we were more concerned about the quarterback. He had failed in a big moment.
Yeah.
I think there's more pressure on the sidelines, certainly with Sean McDermott in this way, because he and his coaching staff, in whatever way you want to believe it, let the team down in that way. Because he had the lead with 13 seconds to go. We all know this, right? Yeah. And so it's not like Josh threw a pick late in the game or, they just, no. Your quarterback played as well as a quarterback can play, and you lost. So, I mean, granted, he's got to do something like that again. And you went out, and to Bean's credit, he went out and said, oh, no, we're not going to just say run it back. We're going to go out and get Von Miller.
Yeah.
For those circumstances. But that being said, think about what it took last year between some of the COVID issues and a few injuries, and when Josh and the offense had some struggles and all that stuff, and people are complaining about and it got you to Kansas City touchdown up with that time left. So to get back to that point, whether that's in Kansas City, in Baltimore, in LA, or in Buffalo, you get to that point and then you get over the hump. I think it's a grind. In the beginning, they got a tougher schedule in the beginning. Yep. You start out 2-2. When you're 2-2 and you're the Bills, the headline is, what's wrong with the Bills?
Correct. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like I'm curious to see how they will handle that internally. Yes. Now, I don't have any question marks. I feel like they will figure it out type of thing, but the outside narrative, that is something that I'm anxious about because there's no room for error when you're expected to win the Super Bowl from the outside, and how pervasive is that into getting into the locker room? I don't expect that to be. Yeah. But
Mike makes a good point by saying that there's 5-6 months before they can do anything about erasing 13 seconds. They can go 16-0. It won't matter. They can go 8-8. It won't matter until they get to the playoffs and can erase that. And to Mike's point, I'll go a step farther where you talk about the pressure on this team. And again, the tough start. I think the Bills need their offense to get off to a good start. Need it to be a good start because I think last year they were slow out of the gates. They played like crap against Pittsburgh and in Miami, they beat them, but their offense was really weird. They had turnovers. It wasn't a clean game. I think they won 35-0, but it was a bad game. Yeah. They were all saying the offense, it took until week 4. I don't think they can afford to get to week 4 and not be at
the Bills offense.
The Bills offense. And I mean that because everybody's going to say, what is Ken Dorsey doing? Where's up? And again, I think some of those Bills guys can look around and you can say, yeah, we got Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. But then you look around and say, there are some people that are missing that we used to be able to say, hey, look, we can snap our fingers and turn on the switch and we're the Bills offense. Like, you don't have some of the same guys.
Everybody missing, Jenna, looks a lot better if you're struggling. It's like,
correct.
Maybe they should have brought Sanders back. Maybe they should have, you know what I mean?
Kept Beasley.
Where's Daboll in the Giants? The Giants offense isn't going to look good, but it's that kind of thing. Whereas you get off to that good start. And by the way, schedule-wise, it is tough in the beginning. One team to keep in mind. I know we have plenty of time to talk about this, but I heard a guy going through the LA Chargers schedule is a walk in the park for like 7 weeks. Jeez. Like if you look at it, they do have 2 division games in there, but I think at least one of them's home and whatever. And then their second half is every week is a tough game. Yeah. So sometimes when you look at these guys, that could be a team that everybody's talking about because they're 6-1. And then you start, bless you, and then you start looking at the schedule and you're like, and then here it goes. So schedule does play a part in it. I mean, you are starting out in LA. I mean, they did win the Super Bowl last year, so that makes it tough. But I'm with Dan. I got to see with a new coordinator, new offensive line coach, I just see him start well.
There's going to be a lot of
That's the
chatter.
thing, though. Like, you have such high expectations, and you do have all these, like, I feel like it's safe to say there probably will be a regression with Ken Dorsey initially taking over because it's a transitional period. He's never called plays, like stuff like that, where I'm like, it's not, it doesn't need to be perfect to end up perfect, but at the same point, it's like that uncomfortableness in the interim that makes me that those expectations are like that makes
Dan,
me.
what I was wondering about is with those changes, how does he approach the preseason? How does he approach playing time for any of these veterans?
That's a good point.
You know, I don't really. I mean, I know what was it? The Green Bay game was last year.
They played a half.
He played them, and they lit everybody up, which is funny. They lit the Packers up in that half a game, and then they started out the year with a terrible game against Pittsburgh.
Yep.
So if they wouldn't have played in that game, the easy narrative is they should have played in the preseason, and they did play in the preseason and look great, and then they didn't start out well. But man, I want to see starters ready to go week one. That's what I want to see.
I would much rather understand if the Bills lose in LA 42-38, and I'd be like, all right, yeah, like the defense will figure it out. If there's one thing we know, the defense always picks up, like, you know, they're kind of feeling it out. But if they lose 20-7, or even if they win 14-10, I'd still be sitting there.
I know, but they'll take a win. I know,
but you would sit there and go, all right, like and like you said, Mike, when everything's going well, you don't miss anybody. When things aren't going so well, you're like, well, what's he up to? What are they doing? So
looking him up on Facebook. Is that what you're doing?
The late night text.
You up?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to get back to the Bills being at Fisher. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to follow us here on the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe, share it with friends as well. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our handles are actually our names, so it's right there. We keep it easy for you. We always appreciate all the love and support. We're so looking forward to seeing everyone out there. If you do see us, say hi. We always love chatting with everyone as well. So just wanted to say thank you, and we're ready and excited. For Mike and Dan, I'm Jenna. Remember to subscribe, but we'll see you next time on the Buffalo Plus channel.